This section will focus on state, local, and tribal legal authorities. Federalism is a governance structure in which two or more governments share powers over the same geographic area. For example, the U.S. Constitution establishes a government based on the sharing of power between the national and state and local governments. Each state has its own constitution, but all provisions of state constitutions must comply with the U.S. Constitution. Under the U.S. Constitution, both the national and state governments are granted certain exclusive powers and share other powers. The 10th Amendment states that powers not specifically listed in the Constitution, like requiring driver's licenses and collecting property taxes, are among powers reserved to the states. The line between the powers of the U.S. government and those of the states is usually, but not always, clear. Whenever a state government's exercise of power might be in conflict with the Constitution, a battle of states' rights ensues, which must often be settled by the Supreme Court. The concept of federalism is important in emergency management because virtually all emergencies start and end locally. As the scale and complexity of an incident increase, state and then federal support may be needed. The 10th Amendment reserves the police powers to the states. Police powers are the inherent authority of a state government to impose restrictions on individual rights for the sake of public welfare, security, morality, or safety. To discuss forms of local government in the United States is to speak about more than 50 different legal and political situations. The states outline the powers of municipal governments in charters. There may be specific or special charters, general or classified charters, usually based on population size, or home rule charters. Indian tribal nations may have their own tribal authorities for emergency management. States vary in the legal authority they grant to local jurisdictions. In some states, an amendment to the state constitution gives local jurisdictions the right to self-govern by enacting local laws consistent with the state and federal constitutions. These states are referred to as home rule states. In other states, local jurisdictions have more limited authority as specified in state statutes. They cannot enact ordinances beyond what is expressly permitted under state legislation. Most of these states apply the Dillons Rule principle in determining the extent of local authority. Home rule is a delegation of power from state to its subunits of governments, including counties, municipalities, towns or townships, or villages. That power is limited to specific fields and subject to constant judicial interpretation. Home rule creates local autonomy and limits the degree of state interference in local affairs. The powers and limits of home rule authority for local governments are defined state by state. There is no one national standard that defines the powers engendered in home rule status. State provisions for home rule by its local government entities can be defined by the state's constitution or by statutes enacted by its legislature. Not all cities make use of the discretionary powers of home rule that are provided by their charter. Functional powers are the most frequently used and expanded. Dillon's Rule is derived from a written decision by Judge John F. Dillon of Iowa in 1868. It is a cornerstone of American municipal law. Maintains that a political subdivision of a state is connected to the state as a child is connected to a parent. Dillon's Rule is used in interpreting state law when there is a question of whether or not a local government has a certain power. Dillon's Rule narrowly defines the power of local governments. Local ordinances and authorities vary widely in their contents, but they should indicate authorities. If you're in your jurisdiction, who is the authority, for example, to declare a local emergency, approve plans, call for evacuations, close roads or to restrict movement in certain areas, impose a curfew, make policy decisions affecting long-term emergency management, act as the final authority